Wait, not yet, right? Steven, don't trust this man. How you doing? How are you doing? I've been a little tired. Of late, it's been busy in my world. Is there a Disney song that says my world? I can do it. Don't tell me. Is it his world? Is it Little Mermaid? Part of his world. Is it part of his world? Is it Ariel? Anyway, I don't remember. I'm sure I watched it, but I'm like 80, so I haven't seen it in over half a century. So this week, I'm going to dive right in. I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to talk about how I came to believe that God will save everybody, a belief that is commonly referred to as Universalism. And I don't want to try to convince you. I think in our day and age, whether you're talking about our faith or our politics or sort of just the way we interact with each other, I think we've lost the ability to hold different points of view. We've lost the ability to disagree as believers. And I think it's true in the world, right? Fox News versus MSNBC and Hillary versus Trump and Clinton versus whomever. Obama versus whomever. I think we see it most clearly in the political stage or in the political arena, but I think as people of faith, I actually think we should hold ourselves to a higher bar in terms of how we handle disagreements. And I think we have failed our faith, and we've failed the people who see us, right? We failed, I would say the world, but I mean to say like our world, like when we can't disagree, whether it's internally as communities of faith or when we can't disagree with people who of other faiths, when we don't know how to think differently but still be around and with other people, I think we compromise and undermine and utterly degrade our witness. So I'm giving you a chance to disagree with me, and maybe it'd be fun to talk about what it looks like to disagree with me in a way that could be good. Maybe. I don't know. I remember driving home from work. This was a few years ago, different job, different part of the country. I had a long commute, 50 minutes each way by car. And I was listening to This American Life. It was an episode on a guy named Carlton Pearson. He was at one point a really prominent pastor, had a mega church in, I think, Oklahoma. It's where Carmen went to church, if you know Carmen, which is Invitation. I saw Carmen in concert. I did the Holy Ghost hop at a Carmen concert when I was in high school. I'm sure I cried when he did The Champion. I know I cried. I'd probably cry now if I heard The Champion. Anyway, I was driving home, episode of This American Life. I gotta pick this up a little bit. Carlton Pearson, megachurch, Pentecostal pastor, and he was telling a story about how he came to believe in Universalism. He came to believe that everybody would be saved. He was telling the story about it, and what I remember most about it was engrossing. I loved it. I loved listening to it. I loved sort of that kind of thing and hearing him talk about it. But what I remember most is not feeling particularly angry about it. So growing up Pentecostal myself, I would have suspected about myself that I would have been predispositioned to disagree and to scream heresy while I was driving down the interstate in Tennessee. But I realized that I wasn't scandalized by it. I wasn't immediately attracted to the idea per se, but it didn't give me the kind of pause that I would have thought it should have given me. And at the time I was doing this little podcast with a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine. And we talked about it that night. And as I reflect, that is sort of the beginning of my sort of road towards holding this view. Along the way, I've read some books on the issue. I have read what I think are pertinent passages in the Bible, both sort of that could be used sort of for and against the idea that God will save everyone. All the places we see Jesus talk about Gehenna, and I mean, I get it. I know. I read a book called If Grace is True. That was an important part of the forming of my thinking in this area. And I remember reading the Bible one day, and this is my experience. I think this is a really important piece of this is my experience, and it could be wrong. And my prayer is that the very Spirit of God would show me that this is wrong. I'm not telling you because I think this should happen to you, or that I think you should interpret. I don't want to transmit my hermeneutic through the camera and have you automatically feel this way. But this is what happened for me. I read where Paul said, "Every knee will bow." You know that one? Every tongue will confess. And I thought, I'd always been taught that scripture, and I always had this picture in my mind of Jesus like forcing everybody to sort of to kneel, right? Like this sort of like cosmic, like you will. And I thought, what if that's wrong? But I thought, what if they're kneeling for a different reason? What if everybody kneels and everybody confesses because they, in that moment, realize? What if it's sort of like this global Damascus Road experience when it's sort of unavoidable? Now, I know C.S. Lewis would say, or he did say in Mere Christianity, that at that moment it's too late. Okay. But I thought, what if it's not too late? What if in that moment we all, upon seeing the risen Christ, glorified and sort of on his throne, what if Christians and non-Christians alike, what if believers, non-believers, what if we all just realized? And I don't know how I don't know how the world's going to end. I don't think Revelation's a ton of help in that regard. That's a separate episode, isn't it? But what if there's this moment when we all realize? What if it's when we die? I don't know. And I thought, that's interesting. So I began to kind of dig into the idea, I thought a lot about, and I researched, I tried to study sort of early church fathers who believed in this idea, and there are some. It's worth looking into. There are folks who sort of, if you think of it as a spectrum, like, eternal conscious torment, which is hell forever, which is how I was raised. And it was an effective teaching method when I was younger, for sure. I got saved a bunch when I was a kid. And then folks like John Stott, British theologian, God rest him. He's passed now. He believed in something like, I can't remember, the term escapes me, but the basic idea is that if there is sort of this hell, this punishment, it's not infinite. It's not eternal. It has a terminus. It ends. And then there just cease to be folks who are in hell. And then C.S. Lewis again makes an interesting argument for something different when in the allegory, The Great Divorce, I think it's an allegory, where folks actually can go from hell to heaven and stay in heaven if they want, but they don't because they're so prideful, they don't want to stay, and in that sense, hell is their choice. That's interesting to me. That's wildly persuasive, only insofar as I think it is loving at some point to say, I'm going to let you have the thing that you want, even if I think this thing is better. So that's kind of where I am. I don't think that means that evangelism is bad, or talking to people about Jesus is something we shouldn't do. I think that Jesus is worth talking about no matter what your view on the afterlife is. I think that's kind of the point in a way, is that the good news goes far beyond what happens to you when you die. The good news is for right now too. So what do we do? If we were friends, what would you do? And you were like, what? What would you do? Would you just tell me you disagreed? Would you say I can't be your friend anymore? What if we went to the same church? What if I sat next to you at church every Sunday? And what if for the first 5 years we were friends, you had no idea I felt this way, and you're like, and let's say we go to some evangelical church and I was part of the prayer team who went down for altar calls. I was like, yeah, I'll pray for people. And you're like, oh, cool. And I was like, hey, just so you know, I think everybody's going to go to heaven, but I love praying for people. And what would you be like, what? Here's how I think we should disagree. I think you should not be afraid to recognize that you and I might think different, if in fact we do think different. I think it's okay for you to recognize and to even say that you think that I'm wrong, because if you think differently, I think you're wrong. But I know I might be wrong, and I know you might be right. And I'd love it if we could actually sort of seek Jesus together. I wish we could do that in our churches. Maybe there are issues that just won't allow it. I don't know. Maybe that's why there were church councils. Maybe we need more church councils. I don't know. But I think that the difficult conversations around what it means to disagree, what it looks like to disagree, are more important than turning our backs on each other. I have a few friends in my life right now, coworkers, friends, who have really shown me a lot of grace. And I think they've shown me Jesus. They've shown me what it means to, in their way, and in that relational context, sort of attempt to love me unconditionally, insofar as they know that I think certain things about certain things. And they have not turned me away. They've not declared me unclean. And I want that for you, and I want that for your faith community. It's difficult, and it requires tough conversation. It requires being honest about how you feel about things, and it requires digging into Scripture and saying, yeah, what about that? And it requires work. Maybe that's why we are where we are in our society. Maybe it's not really just because, I think social media plays a role, but maybe it's because it's just easier to assume you're right and they're wrong, and you're going to heaven and they're not, and so let me get on with my life. That's easier. It's easier to find 3 people who think the way you think than to be friends with even one other person who thinks differently from you. It just takes more work. Ultimately, frankly, I just think it's worth it. I'm glad that I have friends who think different from me. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes it is tiring. Sometimes I do want to sort of be surrounded by folks who think that everybody's going to go to heaven, because then I don't have to talk about it. But that doesn't mean that's the best way just because it's the easiest way. I got to figure that out for myself too. I got to figure that out, right? What does it mean to worship with others? How much do we have to have in common? Is Jesus enough? That's a whole separate episode. But that's good though. But let's put aside faith community. Let's just talk about life. Let's talk about friends and folks you go to church with, but people you work with, people who voted differently from you, people who think that well, I'm not even going to try. People who just hold different views, theological or otherwise. Let's just attempt, I think, to remember that person was created in the very image of God, and they bear the likeness of God in their being. And God delights in them. Would that change the way you treat them? For a second there, I was focused on a different part of the camera. So if it looked like I was looking right through your soul, 1, I am, and 2, I lost focus. Okay, that'll do. My name's Steven, and Don't Trust This Man. You can email me at steven@don'ttrustthisman.net. And hey, listen, just so you know, if you have a church and you're in a position to or some gathering of some kind, school, some other sort of manifestation of a faith community, then you're in a position to sort of make this happen, I would love to actually come to where you are and talk about Jesus or about life or the world. That's really kind of what I'd love to do. This affords that opportunity by distance, but I'd love to sort of be in the room and talk. But you don't know me. I get it. We'll see. If I'm on all the social networks, Facebook, whatever's, thank you for taking the time to watch. Until we are together again, be well. Snapple, snap attack.